Let me ask you something that most men will never say out loud, but nearly all of them have wondered.
Am I normal? Not just in the locker room, not just in bed, but in that quiet, private moment when you're standing in the mirror towel around your waist and the question slips in like a whisper. Is this enough? Now, maybe it started years ago. That first time you saw something in a magazine, or heard the jokes in the locker room, or watched a movie that made you feel like you didn't quite measure up. Or maybe it came later after a comment from a partner, a change in your body, or just a moment of self-doubt you couldn't quite shake. Here's the thing, you're not broken. You're not weird. And you're definitely not alone. In fact, over half of men feel insecure about their size at some point in their lives. But here's the twist. 95% of them are completely within the normal medical range. So why do we feel this way? That's what we're going to explore honestly, openly, and without judgment. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about truth versus myth, science versus shame, and what really matters, not just in terms of size, but in how you feel as a man. We'll walk through how to measure it correctly, what the science says is average, what your partner actually cares about, the real dangers of enhancement procedures, and the safe, proven methods you can use to improve not just performance, but confidence. And by the end, I promise you'll walk away with more than just numbers. You'll walk away with clarity, with strength, and maybe even a little peace. Because this conversation, it's not about being bigger, it's about being better informed and better to yourself. So take a breath, settle in, and let's talk about the question that lives in silence but deserves an honest answer. 1. Why size became a modern obsession and what it's costing. Men. Let me tell you about Ryan. Ryan is 42, married, 2 kids, works in IT. From the outside, he's doing just fine, but a few months ago he sat down with a urologist and admitted something he'd never told anyone, not even his wife. "I think I'm too small," he said, eyes down, voice quiet. Now was he medically? No. He was right in the average range, but in his mind he'd been carrying this belief for over 20 years. It started when he was 17, the gym locker room. Someone cracked a joke. Everyone laughed, he didn't. Then came the internet, and with it, endless images and videos, none of which reflected the reality of 95% of men. See, here's what most people don't realize: men today are under a constant silent pressure to look a certain way, perform a certain way, measure up to standards that were never real to begin with. And unlike women who've had decades of open dialogue about body image, men are expected to stay silent, to man up, to pretend it doesn't bother us. But it does. In a recent study, over 50% of men admitted to feeling some degree of anxiety about their penis size, not because of any physical problem, but because of comparisons to actors in adult films, to photoshopped images online, to myths passed down through locker room legends. And you know what's wild? Only 5 to 10% of women say size is a very important factor in a partner. So, while men are silently struggling with shame, most partners are focused on things like trust, connection, kindness, and presence. Crazy, right? But this disconnect is costing men big time. It's costing them confidence. It's keeping them from intimacy. It's making some turn to dangerous procedures or harmful mental spirals. So, here's the lesson Ryan had to learn, and one I hope you'll take to heart. Feeling insecure doesn't make you weak, but believing those insecurities without question, that robs you of peace you could have reclaimed. Once Ryan heard the real numbers, once he understood how distorted his view had become, he finally started to let go of a weight he'd been carrying for decades. And you can too. But first, let's talk about what those numbers actually are, because chances are you've never been told how to measure properly, or what the science actually says about what's normal. That's next. And You might be surprised by what you learn. Let's keep going. 2. Measuring it right. The only way to know the truth. Let's go back to Ryan for a moment. When the doctor asked him, "Have you ever actually measured yourself?" He hesitated. "Well, sort of," Ryan said. "I looked once in the mirror. Just kind of guessed. That's more common than you think."
Because, let's be honest, most of us don't measure. And when we do, we often do it wrong. We measure when we're nervous, or after a cold shower. Or worse, compare our flaccid self to someone's erect photo online. It's not just unhelpful. It's wildly inaccurate. So, let's clear this up once and for all. There are 2 key things to measure length and girth. And here's how to do it right for length. Start with either an erect or flaccid stretched penis. Both are valid methods used in medical studies. Take a ruler, not from the bottom, not from the skin. Place it firmly against the pubic bone at the top of the shaft. Yes, you may need to gently press through some fat to get to the bone. Measure straight to the tip of the glands, not beyond and not underneath. Why so precise? Because measuring from the skin or from underneath can easily add up to an inch or more, and that, my friend, feeds into the illusion. For girth circumference, use a soft measuring tape, or if you don't have one, a piece of string and a ruler. Wrap it around the middle of the shaft, not too close to the base or the tip. Do this, both flaccid and erect if you're curious, but medically erect girth is the common reference point. It's that simple, but so often missed. Let me tell you about another patient, Ben. Ben was 60, divorced, feeling disconnected. He told his doctor he knew he was below average, but when he measured correctly, he was right in the 60th percentile. Above average. All that time, all that worry, and it was never about the number. It was about not knowing the number. So here's the takeaway. You can't fight a lie until you replace it with a truth. Measurement gives you clarity. Clarity gives you peace. And peace, that's the beginning of real confidence. Now that you know how to measure, the next question is, what do those numbers mean? Because chances are you're still wondering, okay, but what's actually normal? And that's what we'll cover next. Not opinions, not myths, just science. You might be surprised by what the data really says, and even more surprised by how average might be the best news you hear all day. Let's keep going. 3. What science says, and why it's not what you think. So, now that you know how to measure properly, let's answer the question every man has asked at some point: am I average? And to do that, we turn to science. There was a major international study, a meta-analysis, which means it pooled data from over 15,000 men across different countries, ages, and ethnicities. This isn't internet guesswork. This is peer-reviewed clinical research. And here's what it found. Average erect length about 13.2 centimeters, or just over 5 inches. Average erect girth around 11.5 cm, or about 4.5 inches in circumference. And here's the part that surprises most men: 90 to 95% of men fall between 4 and 6.3 inches in length. That means if you're somewhere in that range, you're not small. You're not just okay. You're completely normal. But why do so many of us still feel like we're below average? Because the comparisons we make aren't real. Adult films, for example, don't cast based on science. They cast based on extremes. The way Olympic athletes don't represent the average person at the gym. They're the outliers, not the baseline. And even then, angles, lighting, and digital editing all distort what you see. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was 29, fit, confident. But he told me once, I've never had a problem performing, but I always feel like I'm lacking. Why? Because he had a habit of watching adult content before bed, and somewhere along the way, that fiction became his benchmark. He measured himself after our conversation properly. He was almost exactly average. But what changed everything was this realization.
The problem wasn't his body, it was his expectations. Here's the real lesson. Average is not a disappointment. It's the design. Evolution didn't make most of us too small or not enough. It made us functional, capable, and more than adequate for intimacy, reproduction, and connection. And even for men who fall slightly above or below the curve. Guess what? That number says nothing about your ability to give pleasure, build love, or live fully. So let go of the tape measure for a moment. Because the question that really matters isn't, how big am I? It's, what am I believing about myself, and is it even true? And speaking of beliefs, let's talk about something most men assume their partner cares deeply about, but that turns out to be surprisingly low on the list. That's coming up next. What women actually value and how it might just set you free. Let's keep going. 4. What actually matters to your partner. And it's not what you think. Let's take a step out of the numbers for a moment and into the living room. A few years ago, a group of researchers ran a study. They asked women across different age groups and backgrounds, what makes a sexual partner satisfying? Here's what came up in the top 5 responses: emotional connection, attentiveness, communication, confidence, and feeling safe. You know what didn't make the top 5 penis size? In fact, only 5 to 10% of women said size was a very important factor. Compare that to over 50% of men who believed it was critical. That gap is where the pressure lives, the anxiety, the shame, the overthinking. Let me tell you about Thomas and Michelle. They'd been married 12 years, 2 kids. Thomas was struggling with confidence not because of performance, but because he believed his wife wanted more. He never said it out loud. He just pulled back emotionally, then physically. Michelle, on the other hand, felt him becoming distant. She thought maybe he wasn't attracted to her anymore, that she wasn't enough. Until one night they talked. She looked at him and said, "You've always been enough for me. I just miss you." And that moment, it changed everything. Because here's the truth. Most partners care far more about presence than inches, about how you look at them, touch them, listen to them. They don't want a fantasy. They want to feel desired, chosen safe. The belief that bigger means better is a story written by industries that make money off your insecurity. And if we keep chasing that illusion, we miss what's right in front of us: real intimacy, real connection. So, what's the lesson here? Confidence isn't about being the biggest guy in the room. It's about knowing who you are and showing up fully, because presence, my friend, that's what makes you unforgettable. And speaking of things we shouldn't chase blindly, let's shift gears and talk about something that's exploded in popularity in recent years: cosmetic procedures for penile enhancement. Are they safe? Do they even work? In the next part, we'll walk through the real facts, the risks, the promises, and what you absolutely need to know before ever considering them. Let's go there now. 5. The truth about enhancement procedures and what they don't tell you. A few months ago, a man named Eric sent me an email. He was 37, recently divorced. He'd seen an ad online, one of those flashy promises: gain 2 inches in 30 days, no surgery, guaranteed. He clicked, and within a week he'd ordered a filler injection package from an overseas website. No doctor, no consultation, just hope and desperation. When he finally saw a urologist 3 months later, he had swelling scar tissue and constant pain. Here's the heartbreaking part. He wasn't too small to begin with. He was well within the healthy range. But no one had ever told him that. He believed the lie, that he needed to be bigger to be loved, wanted enough. And sadly, Eric isn't alone. So, let's break down what these procedures actually are. What's real, what's risky, and what's just plain misleading. 1. Girth enhancement. Injectables. The most common non-surgical enhancement today, injecting hyaluronic acid, the same gel used in lip fillers.
When done properly by a trained medical professional, this can temporarily add 2-3 cm in thickness, lasting about 12 to 18 months. But, and this is important, not all clinics use medical-grade materials. Some use non-absorbable substances like silicone or PMMA. These can lead to hard nodules, chronic pain, and in some cases, irreversible tissue damage. And here's the thing they won't tell you. It's expensive. It requires maintenance. And it doesn't fix confidence. It only addresses the surface, never the source. 2. Lengthening surgery. Ligament release. Now, what about increasing length? One method involves cutting the suspensory ligament, the tissue that anchors your penis to the pelvic bone. This makes more of the shaft visible when flaccid, but it doesn't increase erect length. And worse, it can lead to instability during sex and even loss of angle during erection. Many urological boards do not recommend this procedure unless medically necessary, because for the few millimeters gained in appearance, you could lose something far more important: function, sensation, safety.
3. Liposuction and implants. Some clinics promote liposuction of the pubic area to reveal more of the shaft visually. This can help appearance, but again, it doesn't change anatomy. Implants, on the other hand, are often confused as size boosters, but they're medical tools used to treat severe erectile dysfunction, not for cosmetic purposes. And without proper need and supervision, they can cause more harm than good.
So, what's the lesson here? Just because something is possible doesn't mean it's wise. Your body isn't a problem to be fixed. It's a system to be cared for, respected, supported. If you're considering enhancement out of pain or insecurity, pause first. Talk to a doctor. Talk to a therapist. Talk to someone who will see you as a person, not a project. And here's what I always tell my patients. Changing your body won't heal your beliefs, but healing your beliefs might just change how you see your body. In the next part, we're going to shift away from medicine and look at something most men have never considered: how the meaning of size has changed throughout history. You'll be surprised at what ancient cultures believed and how it might just help reframe everything you thought you knew. Let's keep going. 6. A historical perspective that might set you free. Let me take you back not just a few decades, but a few thousand years. Ancient Greece, the cradle of philosophy, art, mathematics, and medicine. Now imagine the statues: Apollo, Hermes, the thinkers, the gods, the warriors. Ever notice something? None of them were sculpted with exaggerated bodies below the waist. In fact, most were intentionally depicted with modest anatomy, not because they didn't understand male form, but because they had a different idea of what it meant to be a man. In Greek society, a smaller penis was a symbol of self-control, intelligence, and dignity. Larger penises, in contrast, were often associated with satyrs' drunkenness or wild, undisciplined nature. One scholar once said, a big penis was seen as comic grotesque, not desirable. Isn't that wild? In a culture that worshipped the human body, it wasn't size that defined masculinity. It was restraint, wisdom, balance. Now, why do I tell you this? Because the way we think about manhood today isn't based on biology or even function. It's based on a narrative, a story. One that was rewritten in the 20th century, amplified by media and exploited by industries that profit off your doubt. But the truth, masculinity isn't measured. It's lived. It's how you love, how you show up, how you carry pain, and how you carry joy. It's in your patience, your strength, your tenderness. That's what partners remember. That's what sons learn from. That's what stays with people long after the lights go out. So if you've ever felt not enough for whatever reason, let this be your moment of release. You are more than a number, more than a measurement. You are a whole man with nothing to prove and everything to give. Final thought. Confidence is quiet. You don't need louder muscles or a longer ruler. You need clarity and kindness, especially toward yourself. And if today's conversation has helped you see yourself in a new light,
then you've already done the bravest thing of all. You faced the mirror and you stayed. That's courage. Thank you for being here, for listening, for being open. If this video brought you insight or peace, feel free to share it with someone who might need it too. Because sometimes, the kindest thing you can say to another man is simply, "You're normal, you're enough, you're not alone." Until next time, take care of yourself.